Good afternoon, everybody. So, my name is Boubker. I'm from McAfee. I'm an enterprise architect. So, I'm here with you today to talk about GDPR and our vision to the GDPR. And hopefully, we give you some good information, good insight to prepare and to start looking at the transformation. That's the idea. So, we look at the agenda. We will talk about some information about the data we generate, some statistics. We look at the threat, the number of threats we are seeing, and we also will look at the number of breaches that is related to this. I mean, in general, if you look at we'll talk about the agenda later on details. So we have the GDPR key changes. We have also the McAfee data security lifecycle. We will talk about that. And then we will talk about the reference design, what kind of reference architecture you need to have, and then some of the program and solution. So starting with what happened in 60 seconds. So this is what's happened for every company. This is worldwide. We are generating more data than we used to be 4 years ago. So now 90% of the data we generate now is just basically just generated in the last 2 years. So we are generating more than almost 1.8 petabytes per second, per minute. That's a lot. So we generate a lot of data. So this is one of the transformation we are seeing. So why I mentioned this, looking at the GDPR, data is a key pillar. So that's where we start. So the data, what kind of data? You generate more data. Then you start with the data. The second thing is also important as a second pillar is the threat landscape. We are seeing from McAfee Lab more than 244 malware per minute. That's a lot. Why I put this? Because there is a relationship between the data we generate and the malware. The malware is targeting this data. So there is a combination. We need to look at all aspects. And most of the data breaches we have seen, they are external. They are using a malware. So of course we have insiders, but we'll look at the details later. But a lot of attacks or a lot of breaches happen from external and using malware, not insider, not intentional or accidental data breaches. Next is the number of breaches we have seen per minute. That is really scary. So you see the numbers is 3,687 data breaches per minute. That's a lot. And this is a worldwide. And you can go here, there is a statistic library where you can see all the numbers. And next you will see, for example, some of the companies, they have been breaches in the past till now. It's a lot. So you think about Target, think about, for example, the insurance company, MySpace, think about Yahoo. All these companies that has been breaches. And not just a breach. Some of them, they damage the business. And this is the top risk companies, for example, that really they get really challenged to get back to the business. And I remember, for example, in insurance, if you're now the Anthem, this is an insurance that lost a lot of record of their customers. So their customer just changed the insurance. They went to another one, which will protect their data. So this is a scary thing for the business. So thinking about protecting the customer data as a primary thing to keep your business up and running is really primary now, especially with GDPR. They are pushing to make sure that the data or the privacy of the data need to take into consideration, not afterward. It's in the beginning. When you start anything, any project in the IT, you need to embed the data protection, the privacy in the beginning, not after when you finish and then say, okay, what about the data protection? What about our customer data? Or what about our partner data? So this is something we need to take in consideration. So this is from Verizon. This is the latest report from Verizon. You see, for example, who is behind the breaches. So you see here, 75% of the data breaches, they were all external. This is external means, is not insiders. This is not a bad guy working inside the company who wants to harm the company. There are some numbers. You see 25% they are insiders, but 75% of the data breaches happen from externally. And then you can see also there is 51% of this attack from external, they're using malware. And we just have a discussion about ransomware, and this is just an example, but there are multiple malware. They target the data. They discover the data inside the company. Once they get in, they start looking at classified data, the critical data, and they start exfiltrating this data, and they start asking for ransom, for money to get the data, or they will publish it in the website. And also, what is also common is most of this malware, it comes through email as a spear phishing. So there's always a combination between spear phishing and malware, external, because that's an easy way to get in any company, is just sending email and making that email is valid. So you will lure somebody to click on that link or to that attachment to get infected. So this is the things we are seeing. So data breaches is not only from insiders, it's also from external. My point is here is malware infection, if you have a non-advanced malware protection, or let's say a complete life cycle of malware protection, you will have also a problem with the data privacy with GDPR. It's not only thinking about I need to buy a DLP, I will be safe. No, a DLP will protect data if you know what data is classified and you know your data. But you need to think also, how can I minimize the infection in the first time before it gets to that data? So there is a combination between data protection and also malware protection. So this is very important to take into consideration. So what is the change now in GDPR? So 4% of potential fines, this is high. I mean, that's the GDPR. You need, if somebody if have a data breach and it didn't really notify that, didn't have notification on that, you will pay 4% of the whole turnover per year. That's a lot. And the second is, and that's the estimation number of data protection officers required in Europe. We will need more and more data officers. So we have in lots of jobs now opening for GDPR will have an officer responsible for the data inside any enterprise. And especially we are talking about if your company is bigger than, for example, 250 users, or they process more than 5,000 personal data per year, they need to have this kind of things. They will be, they need to comply to the GDPR. Next is, that is the time you need to make in consideration when you need to report on a data breach. You have 72 hours, and this is 72 hours you need to inform the officers about the breach. That is important. If you don't do that, you will pay the fine. So this is another thing that you need to take. Means you need to have a monitoring system, and you need to monitor the data in order to find these breaches. So you don't need to wait till somebody will tell you from external that you have been breached. So you need to make sure you have the tools, you have the process in place, you have the people in place, monitoring the data so that you can be up to speed to report that breach. And then you have more than 190 countries, they need to comply to the GDPR. Not only European countries, every company doing business in Europe, they need also to comply to the GDPR. So that's also important to know. And 80% of requirement of this GDPR. This is also things that has been changed. We will discuss what definition of personal data. What is it? Because that is changing also the game. If you remember, the first 95 legislation of Europe has a specific requirement and definition of the personal data. In GDPR, this become really broader. They become including other things that we didn't have in the past. And this is an example of the fine that could be paid, for example, from the FTSE 100, it's like 250 million, it could be a fine for big companies. So now, what what will impact your business? This is the things that you need to look at. Privacy impact assessment. That is mandatory. Every company now needs to assess the privacy once a year. So they need to have a process in place, assessing the data, and that will be a process they need to do externally and also internally. So that is very important. You need to look at the data you use and the data you transfer to somebody else, because there is two kinds of data. You have like a broker, somebody is just processing the data, but somebody who is owning the data, who is collecting the data. So the privacy impact assessment is is an important piece you need to do. You need to have a policy in place, process in place to do that once a year. Personal data, as I mentioned, now include other things. Genetical, cookies, for example, IP address. We didn't use that information before. So this is also considering now, this is a personal data. Medical data also considered as personal data. So when you're handling the data, you need to take in consideration all these aspects before you go and you store this data somewhere. And then you have the consents. If somebody is, for example, when you give the user the consent to accept, like here is our policy, and you have 5 pages, and in the end you say to him, accept in order to get this. That's not acceptable anymore. You need to make it easy, simple, and very flexible to the user, so he can, when he clicks on that consent, it can be easy. And he can also have the expiration date for that consent. So if that user doesn't want, for example, to keep this data more than 6 months at the customer or at that broker, he could have that right to delete that data or to remove that data from that provider, for example. This is very important. And you need to have the protected by design. You need to have due diligence. You need to make sure that all your data is protected. You have the right tools. You have the right process. Also monitoring the tools for the data protection. You need to prove that. You need to make sure you have all those tools in place. A data protection officer now is also important. Every company, as I said, more than 250 users, or they are dealing with processing more than 5,000 personal data. They need to have a data officer. And data breach notification, we have talked about that. Right to be forgotten. That is another one. So the personal data, if somebody want to ask you, the provider or the broker or the processor to delete his data, yes, you can. And there is also a right to copy this data in an electronic device and move it to somebody else. That's also a requirement. So if we want to summarize a bit, because that's a lot of articles on the GDPR, and a lot of articles you need to comply to, so we come up from 3 key privacy management activities. The first one is the maintaining personal data. That is the GDPR Article 30. That is one of the really a key management data activities. Second one is the Article 5, 9, 25, and 32. And this has to do with managing a data security program. And the last one is maintaining data breaches monitoring program. That's Article 24, 33, and 34. Those are the key privacy management activities. So how can we transform our IT or digital environment from compliancy to security? Because in the end, GDPR, it have good things. You know, it's now pushing to have like security by design, not only privacy by design, it's helping customer to move in from reactive security to more proactive security. Through that GDPR, we will have better security. But that is really, I will see that as a transformation or helping companies to transform their company to secure companies, to get more resilience. So this is our defense lifecycle. What you need to do. We have four things you need to do. The preparation. Preparation is included in thinking about inventory, thinking about the data. Where is this data? First thing, where is my data? What kind of data I have in my on-premise, in the cloud? All your business, if you put data in the cloud, you need to know about it, and you need to classify this data. This is a visibility. Inventory, data inventory is important. And doing an assessment. An assessment is in a service. It could be done by any auditors to assess this data and to classify this data. How important is this data? And then second is protection. Make sure you are protecting this data against a malware, against data exfiltration, and that is a key. So you have the right tools to protect the data on premise and also in the cloud, on mobile devices. So you have like complete protection from a malware and also from a data breaches. Detection, so you have a continual process to monitor this data. So you have like security operations in place that monitor the data, and who is touching this data. You think about user behavior analytics, the user themselves, how they touch the data. Look at the baselining of the users. Data analytics, making sure that you have visibility on the data leaving your company. What kind of data is leaving your company? All this kind of visibility is very important. Data is copied to external devices. Some users, they come to the office and they copy data to their USB. Do you have visibility on that? All this kind of things is important for the monitoring. And then you have the correction. So you have to have the process, the right tools. If you see something, abnormal behavior, take action. Action on remediation, fixing, maybe stopping something bad to happen. Could be malware infection. You want to contain that PC. You want to contain that propagation. Or maybe it could be data exfiltration. How can I react to somebody trying to copy data, sending it to outside? How can I react to somebody copying some file, classified file or privacy file to his USB? So I need to take action, and I need to have that process in place. Before I go to buy the tools, or to have the right tools on that, I need to have a processing tools. I have to have like incident response program. If I have a user trying to do something, okay, the reaction would be disable his account, call his manager, call HR. All these kind of things is important to have in place before you go and just you start buying tools and putting them in place. So you have to have a process and program for incident monitoring and reaction. This is very important. So you start for the preparation. You ask yourself question, because the first question you will ask, where is my data? That's the first things you ask, because when you start during the preparation, the first thing is inventory, looking at doing discovering your data. Okay, I have privacy data, I have personal data. I need to have like a definition, and defining this definition through rules or a regular expression or any ways, and go and search for this data. And searching in everywhere, searching in the cloud, on the premise. If you have a cloud, you need to make sure that you have discovery, give you visibility on the data stored in the cloud. If I am in the premise, I have, for example, database, I need to make sure I have discovery on the database to see what kind of data I have in the database. Is it a privacy data? Is it personal data or not? And classify it. If it's personal data, I need to tag it. Put like a stick, what we call tag, to make sure that is classified. Because in the end, when you create a rule to stop this data to leave your company, or maybe you want only the right people to access this data, so you need to have this tag classified. Then you map a reaction to it. So only, for example, this group of users could access this data, but not other groups. That is important. So you need to make sure that you classify the data, and then you tag this data, and then you get the full visibility. When I'm talking about data, you have three kinds of data. We would say data in motion, data in use, and a data at rest. This is the kind of data you need to think of. Data at rest is every data you put somewhere, or maybe storage, maybe database. Data in use, that's the data that the user is doing at that time when he's working, doing his daily job. Data in motion, that the data is going, emails, the data is transferring through upload, all this kind of data classification, you need to look at all of the aspects of it. And then second is looking at the malware aspect. So for example, what kind of risk I have on the data I have on my database. If I have a database, and we know that every customer have a database, let's say Oracle or Microsoft SQL or DB2, whatever database you have, this data is stored there. I'll let you do the risk management. What kind of risk can attack? What kind of things can really attack my database? First thing is the vulnerabilities. We know that a lot of databases, they have vulnerabilities. So it means that somebody will exploit those vulnerabilities. If he exploits the vulnerability, it means he can get the access to the data. Well, we need to make sure that we do also vulnerability scan on our asset. So make sure that we don't have vulnerabilities, because those can be exploited by hackers and they can access the data. So vulnerability scan is very important. And also have like what we call cloud visibility. If you adopt a cloud, make sure you have a visibility, real-time or near real-time visibility on the data that get to the cloud and copy from the cloud. And who accesses this data? Very important to have that visibility. From the user behavior side, you need to make sure that you monitor the users. If I am a developer, and I have like developing applications, and I have access to the cloud, you need to make sure you monitor every user, not only specific, everyone. But that's give you a complete visibility and control, because more visibility, you get more control. And that is the first step, which we call preparation. And then you go to the second step. So the second step is the protection. So is your data protected against external and insider attack? That is the question you need to think about ransomware. Think about fileless attack. Now we are seeing more fileless attack. They are more advanced. Ransomware is not advanced thing. It's just a thing that will encrypt. You cannot access your data. That's it. But you think about advanced malware, advanced attack that we are seeing now, like I said, zero-day malware, like fileless malware, exploit, for example, insider, intentional or unintentional. It could be. Sometimes just by mistake, people will try sending data outside to wrong address, or maybe to put it in somewhere in the wrong, uploading the wrong sites. Make sure you have a protection on this kind of behavior. So external and insider protection, including malware protection and also the data protection. A data could be like a DLP solution, encryption, device control, all this kind of protection that will help minimizing the data breaches. And then we go to the next. Next will be the detection. That is really, really something we need to improve, because security is like a balance control. What I mean by balance control is not only prevention. Security is not only prevention, because we know we cannot prevent 100%. You cannot. It doesn't exist. So make sure you balance your control. I need to have my protection or my prevention capabilities. Also, I need to have good detection capabilities, and that is also the correction or remediation capability. This is the balance control. So if I cannot stop it, well, I need to see it, at least an indicator of compromise. Tell me that something is abnormal, and I just go to do investigation. That is the monitoring. So monitoring is very, very important piece, and that is the detection capabilities, and not on the premise and also on the cloud. So monitor the data and everything, collect the logs. That's exactly what you need to do. Collection of the logs of cloud, for example. If you have AWS or Azure or VMware, make sure you collect those logs. So who is doing what on the cloud? Make sure you collect a log from DNS, firewall, IPS, endpoint. That gives you visibility what's going on your environment. And then you also collect a log from the data. So who's touching the data? Monitor your data. That is the combination of the detection. If you have a SOC, that is where you get that dashboard showing you the incidents and also the things happening in your environment. So that is not only focusing on protection. Detection is also need to take also better in our cyber industry. And then the next is thinking about correction. Correction again, because security in the end, GDPR, malware, is all about speed. If you are fast, if you detect something fast, if you can stop something fast, if you remediate fast, if you can stop something fast, you will minimize the impact. That is all about. So that's what we're trying to do. So if you have like the tools, the process, and the people in place, they can get that speed and get the visibility and react fast. That you can minimize that impact. So the correction is also part of it. And as I said, we need to make sure you have the right tools, the right process in place that can help you taking action. If you see something that is not normal and you validate it is bad, take action, stop it. And that's GDPR. You need to have that from the malware perspective and also from the data protection perspective. Because as I said, you have a SOC, can stop a malware, you contain a system or infected system. If for the data, you can also stop that user sending the data outside, or that malware trying to exfiltrate the data, you can stop it. Or maybe you can take action to contain or quarantine, or whatever action you can do. So if we look at the platform, this is the reference architecture. I mean, GDPR need to have a reference architecture, and this reference architecture is to do with multiple layers. The first is sensory layer, what we call sensory layer. The sensory layer, this is where you start your tools to stop, to get more protection and maybe even detection capabilities. And this including the malware, because that's a part of GDPR. You need to make sure you have the right protection and detection on the sensory, endpoint, network, and then from a data side. So this is two things, threat prevention, data protection, are combined. I mean, GDPR is not about only protecting the data. Think about the 75% of attack coming from malwares. That's also when you need to start thinking about having also the right protection capabilities on the sensory, network, and the endpoint. And then you start with intelligence, sharing, collaboration. So intelligence sharing is to do with, if I see something, an indicator of compromise, I need to publish that. I need to share it with everyone, you know, and thinking on listening to that communication bus. And the communication bus is the collaboration bus. So you have to collaborate, share information between components. And then you go to the what we call data analytics and the malware analytics. So data analytics, I have the right tools to do data analytics, and the malware analytics, I need to be able to detect and analyze the 0-day and unknown, everything I cannot detect. I need to have the right tools to do that. So that's what we call a malware analytics. And then you have like user behavior analytics. That's something new, what we call UBA. User behavior analytics also is a part of that protection, the analytics, because it helps you to see the behavior of the user, because it's a part of this data protection lifecycle. So UBA is also part of that. And then you get like the SOC services. You need to make sure you have data analysts, you have to have like a malware analyst, you have to have like incident response analyst. All these people, they are part of that platform. And this is a complete reference architecture that will help you, that you protect your data, you protect your asset against data breaches and also against a malware attack. So McAfee Data Security Program. This is the program that starts with discovery and assessment. This is a service that we could provide, or you can also use a third-party companies. They can provide that service. It's you can do that. And that starts with assessment. Like I said, this is a part of the GDPR. Inventory, data classification. That's a challenge that a lot of customers they have when they try to start a project or data loss prevention or data loss product. Data classification is a part. And then the service discovery, what kind of apps, what kind of data I have on my network. And then next you go to data protection. Accidental, not accidental, but on purpose. You need to have the right tools and the right process in place to protect this data. And then you have application security, web servers, database servers, all this asset, because they store a lot of data, or maybe they process data. So make sure you're protecting this asset. And then we go to the cloud data and services. Is also part of the ecosystem. Cloud is not, don't forget the cloud, is a key part of the ecosystem. And then you have the user behavior analytic. You need a SIM, for example, for the data analytic, log management. And then you have like the orchestration. How can I orchestrate all that? How can I create like a playbook? If something happened, I need to react fast, and that's the playbook you need to do. And this is our our packages. This is a solution package we can do today with you and with every customer. We are doing that already. So from the discovery assessment, we can help. We can help customer discovering his data, classify data everywhere, I mean in the cloud and also in the premise. We can also do, for example, for removal media, disk encryption, and that is important in GDPR. Encryption become more and more important for privacy and for personal data. We can encrypt data on a disk and also on a removal media. And then you have like the malicious theft on a DLP endpoint, network DLPs, and then also like database activity monitor. We can also protect that database. We talk about that vulnerable database. We also can protect it. And then about the gateway DLP. So every proxy, we can also make sure that that classified data is not leaving your company. From the other side on the cloud, also we have full set of the cloud visibility. We give you a way how to see your data in the cloud, get that visibility, and also get control, and also protect the cloud from intrusion, and from using the IPS, intrusion prevention system, on the cloud, on AWS and Amazon, and even with the VMware, NSX, for example, if you have your private cloud. We have also detection and response, complete data lifecycle from data analytic using SIEM, from user behavior using one of our partner called Interset. They also do that and integrate with our ecosystem. And also with Tropics is another company, they do honeypot. And then the last is talking about the application security. I mean, web, database, and other solution. So this summary, just to summarize, because we are finished now. So three things you need to take in from this session. Build a data safe culture, develop policy, and then use the rights control awareness. Train the user, train your user, because that is important. User, they are really one of the most important piece in the whole life cycle of data protection. You need to get more awareness or user training how to handle data. And then build privacy by design. Have privacy in the beginning. If you start any project, any things, you think about privacy by design. Use that in the beginning, not afterward. And then prepare for data breaches. Have the right rules, have the right process. If something happened, to take action, to inform people, that is also important. Thank you very much.